Hello, this is Henry Covert. I'm going to be covering my Retrodrome column, which I have been amiss in posting the last several months. So this will only be the second one I'm doing. I covered Ganja and Hess a few months ago. This will be the first I'll be doing on video. And I'm going to be covering Cannibal Apocalypse, a gem from 1980, directed by Antonio Margheriti. And I'm just going to talk about it and mention a few things about it. This is the DVD cover. Don't have the Blu-ray yet. Not getting into the whole Blu-ray conversion thing yet. And this is a good old-fashioned DVD. And essentially this movie is one I'd heard about for many years, and I assumed was another one of the Cannibal Holocaust kind of knockoffs where a bunch of unpleasant people go to the Amazon or Papua New Guinea or wherever and are hacked to pieces mercilessly, and lots of real animal deaths ensue. So pretty unpleasant movies, though I do think Cannibal Holocaust is kind of a classic of its kind. Turns out this is a different kind of movie. It kind of treats cannibalism like a plague or virus. A little bit like Dawn of the Dead, when you get bitten you turn into a zombie. Kind of like in Rabid, you get stuck by the girl's faux penis and then you turn rabid. And so it's that kind of thing, and kind of like Rabid also infects like the urban areas and turns into kind of an urban warfare, kind of fighting on the streets action movie. So it's kind of a genre mashup with action and horror, and there's plenty of gore, there's some humor, there's some funky music that's kind of like goblin-inflected music. Basically, John Saxon, who's familiar to genre fans for Nightmare on Elm Street and Enter the Dragon and God knows how many other movies, he just does an incredible job in this film, and I really enjoyed seeing him carry the whole movie for once instead of just doing a character a bit. And he's a Vietnam vet. They shoot in Vietnam in the beginning. Actually, they shoot in the woods outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and you can't really tell the difference, to their credit. And essentially, Norman Hopper, who's the character played by John Saxon, comes upon two of his buddies from his hometown. Just happened to be, one is named Charles Bukowski, yes, that's the name of the character, played by Giovanni Lombardo Radici, or John Morgan, and Tommy Thompson, played by Tony King. I'll tell you more about them in a minute. And these guys are basically fighting over the remains of a scorched Viet Cong person, and as they're devouring them, Tommy gets a little bit excited and bites Norman. And so Norman now has these years later, 10 years later I guess, Norman is having these kind of post-traumatic stress nightmares, and his wife, who's played rather flatly by Elizabeth Turner, she's kind of consoling him, and her bad dubbing doesn't really help, I have to say. And she's kind of consoling him and telling him it's going to be okay, and he takes pills to kind of assuage these nightmares he keeps getting about the bite and all this other stuff related to the cannibalism. Well, basically he's trying to suppress these urges. He ends up biting a neighbor, played by Cynthia De Carolus, who's a pleasant-looking teenager in this. Some people might remember her from Cat of Nine Tails by Dario Argento, where she does a wonderful job as a little girl ward of Carl Malden. But anyway, so after he bites her, not too fiercely, he begins kind of fearing for his sanity, and he starts getting phone calls from Charlie Bukowski, again the character, not the writer, and who's being let out of the booby hatch. And Bukowski is completely unhinged, and he's constantly dreaming and thinking about biting people, and finally does in a movie theater. And hence we have this protracted action scenario where these ridiculous, buffoonish bikers start trying to corner him in the mall, and then it's kind of Dawn of the Dead echoes, and then the police come, and they're played by real-life sounding rednecks, Atlanta actors, and basically it becomes a whole free-for-all with motorcycles going through the aisles and everything else, and him shooting people and calling them shit-face, and eating what he can out of their corpses as he goes along. And finally they talk Norman into coming and doing some negotiator style work with Charlie, and Norman's able to get through to Charlie, and they'll have to kind of trick him into being taken into custody. So he goes into custody. He's back in the insane asylum with Tommy, Tommy's become a ravenous madman. Let me stop at this time to talk about these two actors real quick. Charles Bukowski is played by Giovanni Lombardo Radici, or John Morgan, and he has kind of a reputation of being oft and very horrifying and repulsive ways in movies. In Lucio Fulci's House by the Cemetery, he gets a punch press through the brain, and that goes all the way through his head. And in the not-so-classic, well, to me anyway, Cannibal Ferox, he has his penis taken away from him, shall we say, in a colorful fashion and devoured. And then they continue to torture him to death. And so he kind of gets the short end of the stick in this. Even in House by the Edge of the Park, where he plays one of the terrorizers, still something horrible happens to him. So in this movie, he kind of comes out where he's doing more of the dispatching than being dispatched, but eventually he does kind of meet his fate, shall we say, and it's well worth the wait. It's one of the most wonderful set pieces of the movie. Tony King plays Tommy Thompson. Tony King was a blaxploitation actor who was featured in Shaft and especially in Black Caesar and Hell Up in Harlem. He does a really good job in Hell Up in Harlem as a nasty character named Zach who manages to beat the hell out of poor Fred Williamson's father and induce a heart attack in him. So the great cast for the three cannibals, and not too many other notable actors nobody really that I was really that familiar with. I'll stop and talk about Margheriti briefly, the director. He directed a lot of movies under the pseudonym of Anthony M. Dawson, which was a name he liked because it was another actor's name. And he was known as that on the international market for a long time. But Margheriti did a series of gothics in the 60s. La Danse Macabre, which was remade as Web of the Spider, which he also directed with Klaus Kinski as Edgar Allan Poe. That was pretty memorable. Long Hair of Death and The Virgin of Nuremberg with Christopher Lee. I especially liked the La Danse Macabre or Castle of Blood with Barbara Steele. It's supposedly based on a Poe story. It actually is not, but it does feature Poe as a character, and it's beautiful mood, wonderful atmosphere. About half of the ones here I'm mentioning are black and white, and the other half are color, but he's really a master at creating mood in both of those. He did a series of spaghetti westerns, most of which I have not seen. In the mid-'70s, he did a spaghetti western, which was a spaghetti western meets blaxploitation, called Take a Hard Ride, which I'm quite fond of, with Fred Williamson and Jim Brown and Jim Kelly as a half-breed martial artist. Go figure with that. And that was a pretty fun movie. And again, it started to show where Margheriti was going with enjoying doing more action and not quite as much mood kind of things. And invariably, he drifted into gore, and as the demand came for gore in the zombie and cannibal movies, he kind of moved gradually in that direction. He didn't do a whole lot in that direction, but Cannibal Apocalypse is definitely his statement on it. It was originally released as Apocalypse Domani, which it means Apocalypse Tomorrow, because Apocalypse Now is popular at the time, so that's hence the title. It was also known as Cannibals in the Streets, Invasion of the Flesh Hunters, etc. But Cannibal Apocalypse is pretty much the title that now it's internationally known as. And for a lot of years, you could only get this in a very cut videotape. Tons of shots were excised. Of course, it was pan and scanned. It looked horrible. And again, the titles were changed here and there. But this company here, this Image Entertainment, put out the Euroshot collection. And this is really the definitive disc. It has a wonderful documentary interview with John Saxon. He talks about how depressed he was upon playing in such a movie because the things he had heard about Cannibal Holocaust in these films disturbed him. And he refused to do any shots where he was actually shown engaging in cannibalism himself. Some things were implied or a little off camera, but Margheriti gracefully allowed him to do this because he respected John Saxon as an actor. Of course, the other two stars, are just gorging on flesh and entrails right and left, so there's no lack of that. The Documentary also talks with Margheriti, who passed away just a very few years ago after this DVD had come out. And he's just a really jolly man, and he's a real enthusiast for the action genre. And he wanted to put some of the Dawn of the Dead style kind of action in the mall into this movie. And he wanted to kind of do his own thing. He didn't want to do a Cannibal Holocaust. He didn't want to do a zombie movie. He wanted to kind of make his own mark. And it's kind of a unique movie. And it's one of those movies that more people know about it now, and thanks to the DVD revolution. But it still, I think, is kind of, semi-obscure and deserves to be seen by anybody who's into any of those genres. It's a finely made movie, and John Saxon does a great job as the lead character. His performance is pretty much worth the whole movie. And basically, it continues to kind of build towards the cannibals uniting, and they're on the run, and they're pursued down the sewers, and there's a number of gore set pieces there that are kind of classic. And there are the two sidekick guys, Bukowski and Thompson. They're loyal to their captain, Norman Hopper, John Saxon, to the end. And it's really wonderful seeing an Italian movie from this period also that's shot largely with live sound, very little dubbing, so there's a lot of immediacy. It was shot on location solely in Atlanta, and it's one of those movies that I always have fun watching. I can't get enough of. I've seen it umpteen amount of times, and it always puts a smile on my face. Don't ask me why, but it's just very high energy, and pretty much anything goes, and it kind of bends the genres till they kind of snap. So I would recommend this to fans of Margheriti, fans of John Saxon, horror fans, action fans, genre hybrid fans, anybody who wants to see a good mashup film that's just completely over the top, does whatever the hell it wants to do, and plays by its own rules. So I'm recommending the highest possible recommendation for Cannibal Apocalypse. And thanks a lot, and take care.